I hate that. Okay, so picking up with George H.W. Bush. Reagan's VP, George H.W. Bush, won the presidency in 1988, mostly because of his connection to Ronald Reagan, even though he wasn't very popular among Republicans. And the most notable aspect of George H.W. Bush's presidency was his involvement in the Gulf War. In August of 1990, Iraq invaded Kuwait for more control over the Middle East's oil supply. The US demanded Saddam Hussein, the leader of Iraq, withdraw his troops, which he refused to do. In reaction to this, the United States led an intense bombing of Iraq for 6 weeks, and this is known as Operation Desert Storm. After 6 weeks, Hussein agreed to remove themselves from Kuwait and were required to submit themselves to inspections to ensure they had no weapons of mass destruction like nuclear weapons. So part of the surrender is that the United States can now involve itself and check to make sure that Iraq does not have any of these nuclear bombs. Any questions on the Gulf War or George H.W. Bush? Great. That leads us to the 1990s and President Bill Clinton. When Bill Clinton was elected, he was a very young president in comparison to his predecessors, especially in comparison to like Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was the eldest president to ever be elected, and then we turn over to Bill Clinton, who becomes one of the youngest presidents ever elected. And this gives him a very different persona with the American public. He goes on talk shows and he plays the saxophone, and he is just considered like a cool guy president, which creates a sense of public appeal to him. He is the very first Democrat president to serve more than one term since FDR. So we're in the 1990s, and it hasn't been since and FDR is the last Democrat to serve more than one term. One of his main goals was welfare and healthcare reform. Clinton defined his politics as a quote-unquote third way. Sorry. And what this third way is he tried to find the middle ground to appeal to both the moderates and the liberals in his party. However, his presidency was marked by an impeachment scandal. Bill Clinton had an affair, and there are a lot of new narratives responding to what this affair was. He had an affair with White House intern Monica Lewinsky. And there's been a new narrative. They were definitely the subject of comedy for a very long time. However, in this new era, a lot of women especially are looking at the fact that this was the president and she was an intern in her early 20s and the type of power dynamic that held. So it's something that people are continually reevaluating and reconsidering. So he has this affair with his intern, and when approached about it and accused of having this affair, he denied it and said, nope, this isn't a thing. Like, I didn't do it. And then they got actual physical evidence that, yes, it was happening. And so he was impeached for misleading and lying to the American public. So he was not impeached for having this affair. He was impeached because he had a sense of untrustworthiness toward the American public. Maddie, I see your hand. I'm going to call on you once I finish the sentence, or 2 sentences. So he is impeached, and this is mostly for the breaking trust with the American public. But because this is like he was impeached for lying to the American public, he was acquitted, and it just becomes more of a feature of his presidency. And even though this happened in his second term, when he left his second term as president, he left with relatively high favorability ratings. So this did not totally destroy his reputation with the American public. Yes, Maddie, what was your question?
Hillary, he's married to Hillary. Well, he was Hillary Clinton his wife.
Yes.
So they got a divorce?
No.
What?
How dare you when you let him in?
She has stuck by his side since the affair. And
Ew.
there are a lot of different approaches to that. Okay, enough of that fun stuff or interesting stuff. This takes us to George Bush, or George W. Bush, the son of George H.W. Bush. Now, as I'm sure you all know, 9/11 is the defining moment of George Bush's first term as president. On September 11th, 2001, terrorists affiliated with the terrorist group Al-Qaeda hijacked and flew airplanes into the World Trade Center of New York City and the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., and killed nearly 3,000 Americans. This is the deadliest terrorist attack on American soil. Before this, it was Pearl Harbor, and this is much bigger than Pearl Harbor. After 9/11, Bush declared the war on terror and sent troops to Iraq and Afghanistan to dismantle and destroy the Taliban. And because of his appeal to the quote-unquote family values or Republican values, Bush was reelected in 2004. However, as his second term came to an end, the Great Recession began to becomes one of Bush's greatest legacies. The Great Recession is the worst global economic crisis since the Great Depression. The Great Recession resulted from a combination of tax cuts, spending increases, and the devastating effects of a banking crisis in the mortgage market or the housing market. The recession contributed to rising income inequality and has promoted a debate about the role of the federal government in regulating private industries. Okay. Any questions on George Bush? Well, and that leads us to the GOAT. The greatest of this slideshow for sure. Okay, so Barack Obama was elected during this Great Recession of the late 2000s. And so when Obama was elected as president, he authorized a massive economic stimulus package that resolved pretty much the worst parts of the crisis, but it did also increase the federal debt. Obama continued the fight against global terrorism that George Bush started, and it's in his presidency in 2011 where we see the assassination of Taliban leader Osama bin Laden, which I misspelled in the slideshow. Laden is spelled Ladin, not Linden. Woof. So that is one of the And in the final years of his presidency, he removes the final combat troops from Iraq. So those are the two biggest foreign issues that Obama is involved in. And in terms of the domestic, his signature legislative achievement was the Affordable Care Act, which we know as Obamacare. And this mandates that health insurance, this requires all Americans to have health insurance. Another thing that this does that is a really big deal is he makes it illegal for insurance companies to use somebody's pre-existing condition as a reason to deny them health insurance. So if you had to switch health insurances and you have maybe something like diabetes, your current health insurance cannot, your health insurance company cannot deny you health insurance because you have diabetes. And despite the successes of healthcare reform, there are some negative sides to his healthcare reform. For example, some people that already had health insurance, saw the cost of their health insurance go very, very high. And one of the reactions to this is the creation of the Tea Party. Now, the Tea Party is not a third political party. It is a division of the Republicans. So the Tea Party are the most right wing of the Republican Party. And the Tea Party pushed very anti-government sentiments and pushed a high degree of individualism. Okay, and then those are the key points from Barack Obama. I'm so glad that the United States stopped electing presidents after him. It's a great choice because it's such a great legacy to leave on. We totally don't have a president right now. It's fine.
Wait, what?
I'm being sarcastic.
Oh.
I'm just being sarcastic. Okay, so that is the end of the slideshow for Barack Obama. Any questions about this slide? Great. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing. Okay, so let me go ahead and do one thing. Okay, so just use your lecture notes and I'm going to be cold calling for a really short bit of discourse before we finish out the day. Yes, Erica.
Is US Gov going to be about the current government?
So AP government is more about how does the American government work. So it's going to be a lot of looking at founding documents and important, like a lot about founding documents, political parties, Supreme Court cases especially. Yes, Madison.
Are you going to be the teacher for next year?
Hopefully, probably. Not done with me yet. Sorry, guys.
Oh, man.
Erica, did you have another question or is your hand just still up? Okay, I just want to make sure. Okay, so just going to do a quick bit of discourse and then we will adjourn for the day. Okay, what do you think is the defining feature of Reagan's presidency? You can either think about yesterday's lecture or today's lecture. What do you think is the most important thing about Reagan's presidency? Jade.
You said, what do I think about it?
Yeah, just giving your personal opinion. What do you think is the most important part?
The most important part of Reagan's presidency, hold on, I have to go back to my notes.
While Jade is looking at her notes, Janiyah, be prepared to build on whatever Jade says. Okay, and while Jade, never mind. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So I was gonna say that because he decreased taxes a lot in
Mhm.
like the budget proposal, I guess you could say. That was like the main part because the United States had like a lot of debt and stuff like that. So he kind of made sure the United States wasn't in so much debt.
Mhm. Okay, build on Jade's response. You can either corroborate or add a different perspective of Janaya.
I think that it like caused more chaos because of how it helped sell weapons, well, provide weapons for Iran.
Absolutely. Okay, what do you think about same question? What do you think is the most important feature of their presidency for Bill Clinton? Starting with Janiqua.
Like most important, I don't know. I would probably say that the fact that he was like one of the first Democrats to serve more than 1 year since FDR is significant because it shows how Republicans held like a lot of power. But then also you could say that his like lack of trust with the American public was also significant. Like his whole impeachment basically, you know?
Mm-hmm. Great. Build on what Janiqua said, Dwayne.
Wait, what's the question again? I forgot the question.
Just what do you think is the most important part of Clinton's presidency, either off of yesterday's or today's lecture?
Like he, I don't know. I guess like him panicking, thinking that it was the affair. He lied to the public, causing him to get impeached. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's basically.
That's fine. Dwayne, you're good. It's okay. No, that's definitely a big deal. He's the first president since technically Andrew Johnson to ever be impeached. Because remember, Nixon resigned before the impeachment process. So technically the only presidents to ever be impeached are Andrew Johnson, Bill Clinton, and Donald Trump.
Nah, I'm only laughing
That's part.
the story. Like the story, the story I heard is hilarious.
Yeah, well, yeah, the affair is like unfortunately a defining feature of his presidency, and through a lot of new like feminist ideas, unfortunately, like Monica Lewinsky like bore a brunt of it. Like a lot of people made her the joke, but in recent years, a lot of people have been rethinking maybe that's not fair because of the power dynamic. She was super young. He was the president. Interesting. Brianna.
Wait,
Nah.
Donald Trump, he's actually impeached. I thought what's going on? So Donald Trump did get impeached?
He was impeached, but he was acquitted.
Oh, so, okay.
Yes. So Andrew Johnson, Bill Clinton, and Donald Trump are the only presidents to be impeached because technically Nixon resigned before he was impeached. Great. What do you think are the most important parts of George W. Bush's presidency and like his role in it? Adriana. Oh, she was here. Oh, she's not here today. Sorry. Isis.
Yes.
What do you think is the most important part of
Go get your pump. The most important part of what?
of Bush's presidency? Yeah.
The most important part of Bush's presidency would have to be the Great Recession, I would say, because we said that it had caused a global crisis, like that was similar towards the Great Depression.
100%. It's definitely a big deal, and that's something where I think you guys were really young to have an active memory of it. Like I'm sure you guys, if you think about it, you'll have some memories, but like for me, it was like, especially where I lived, being in the part of Southern California that I was, we got hit bad with the Great Recession, and just seeing how people had to readjust their lives was really crazy. Okay. So Maddie, I just saw your question. I'm going to go into that in just a minute. Great. And then, so when you think about the United States today, we today and yesterday, we went over period 9, which is considered modern US history from 1980 to the present. When we look at Reagan, George H.W. Bush barely counts, just kidding. But when we look at Reagan, George H.W. Bush, Clinton, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama, who do you think had the greatest impact on creating the America we have today? I'm going to start with a couple cold calls, but this is purely your opinion, so just tell me, which president do you think had the biggest effect on creating today's America? And just kind of tell me why. Starting with Cedric.
I would say out of all the presidents, I'm stuck between Reagan and Obama. I'm gonna go with Obama because a lot of people liked him, so that means he did a lot more. I mean, he was the first Black president.
Mm-hmm. Definitely creates a cultural shift. Is electing the first Black president definitely was a culture shift. And then in 2016, we saw a culture regression. Build on that, Aaron. Who do you think is the most important?
Obama.
Why do you say
that? Because, like Cedric said, he was the first Black president. He did a lot for the African Americans, help increase their, lifestyle in the community.
Go ahead and raise your hand. Does anybody have, would anybody say somebody different than Obama? There is no. Erica, go ahead.
To play devil's advocate, because we still have so many problems with Iran and Iraq and those countries, you could say Reagan for the way that he handled the scandal and giving Iraqis the weapons, and for George Bush too, because he was there after 9/11 and was like just also the way he handled 9/11 you could say is what causes our tension with those countries still today. But both of them, their relationship with those countries has led to problems today.
Mm-hmm. And this is very much like my historically based opinion. George W. Bush was not a saint at all. Like, there are so many problems with his presidency. Like, the Patriot Act greatly infringes on people's rights. And there are a lot of crimes against humanity that are done in his presidency. But something I just kind of want to say is, like, in the wake of 9/11, within like a few weeks, he says in a speech, like, and to our Muslim friends, we respect your faith. And then you have in 2016, Donald Trump saying, Islam hates us. So again, I'm not like, I can go on and on about George W. Bush. There are a lot of issues, but yes, his war on terror is really bad. But when you compare it to the rhetoric of today, it's very interesting how much it has shifted. And that actually leads perfectly into Madison's question on the Iraq war. One of your exit ticket questions is, how does the war in Iraq compare to other wars in the past? So let me, how did my phone fall on the ground? So I'm just gonna kind of give you some comparisons, and then you can expand on it in your exit ticket. So the Iraq war, you have the domestic attack on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, which leads to a feeling of retribution and patriotism. What other time in American history has a domestic attack led the United States to declare war on another country? I'll take it.
Pearl Harbor.
What was that again, Erica?
Pearl Harbor.
Pearl Harbor and World War II, exactly. So it has a very similar connection to World War II. However, we don't really win the Iraq war and the war with Iraq and Afghanistan. It just continues, and it's just a bad situation. And the war on Iraq and Afghanistan, Americans start off really like patriotic, like, yeah, we're gonna do this, like avenge America. But young Americans especially become very disillusioned with the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. What does that compare to? Does anybody have an idea? What other war do Americans get disillusioned with after a while?
Vietnam.
Vietnam, beautiful. So you can compare the community takes on the way that the Americans approach war. Now, of course, that's not just like in Vietnam. There are some Americans that are very pro, like, no, we're going to win the war. And yes, that exists in the Iraq and Afghanistan war, but it's a little different. What else? Those are the two major ones. But yeah, you could compare the start of it to World War II and just Americans' perception of the war to Vietnam for sure. Great. Does anybody have any questions for me? Okay, as you all know, there is no APUSH tomorrow because of AP Lang. Yay! But I will see you guys as we get prepped for your exams. As you guys get prepped for ELA, I will see you quite a bit tomorrow, but we will still have APUSH on Thursday and Friday, so be prepared to come here for that. I am going to go ahead and release you guys to your exit ticket. Please put into the chat that you have finished and submitted your exit ticket, and once I confirm, you will be free to go.